Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is quite frankly unbelievable. We thank you all so much for coming out tonight. I mean, we've had lines out the door for Historical Society events before. One of them was for the screening of Aspen Extreme, and but this is fantastic. Thank you all so much. My name is Mike Monroney. I'm the history coach of the Aspen Historical Society. We apologize that it's standing room only. We just had no idea. Those of you in the back, I've just had a request from the speakers. It gets tough sometimes with a sold-out event like this, that people in the back start to drink more and start talking. Please don't do that tonight. We really appreciate it. We want to hear what these guys say. Just a couple of quick things. This is an addition to our normal Time Travel Tuesday series. Those continue throughout the rest of the season. We've got 4 more authors coming up, including Charlie Patterson next Tuesday night. He just went into the Hall of Fame. On the 2nd of March, you remember, you've kind of heard maybe we have World Cup finals this year? Yeah. The Historical Society is actually going to have an exhibit at the base in Wagner Park. And on March 2nd, our curator is going to go over sort of a Ski Racing 101, Aspen Ski Racing 101, in that same room, the public room at the library. So this event is sort of the brainchild of Chace Dillon. He's the new, I'm going to turn that down just a little. The new president of the board of the Aspen Historical Society. So let's give it up for him. He's going to introduce everybody else.
Thanks for coming, everybody. This is awesome. I really appreciate it. We've got an awesome lineup tonight. We're going to be talking about the history of backcountry skiing in Aspen and what started it, what were the drivers, what were the motivations. We've got some of our local backcountry skiing heroes here tonight to help us talk about the history. You know, we're going to have time for questions at the end, so make sure you hold your question till then. And I do want to give a shout out to all the backcountry skiing ladies that we have from Aspen. We got a lot of men up here, but we've got a lot of very talented women in the valley as well, including our own Christy Mann, who was the first woman to ski all the 14ers. So in the near future, be looking for a panel of all women. I think that'd be really interesting. So now to introduce our amazing panel. First up, we've got Neil Beidleman. Neil's a world-renowned mountaineer and climbing guide. His long list of accomplishments include multiple Everest summits, and the first ascent of a new line on Capitol Peak with Chris in 2006. He grew up skiing around Aspen. I've heard a little bit about it. It's great stories, and he was the first person to link up all the local 14ers in a summer traverse, which is pretty interesting. Next up, we've got Art Burrows. Art started touring around the valley in the late 1970s and was a major innovator of telemark skiing. He has many years of ski product development behind him and has also published several books on ski mountaineering. He's also a fantastic photographer, and there's a few awesome pieces hanging on the wall here at the Alehouse. Next up, we've got Dick Jackson. Dick's the owner of Aspen Expeditions and probably the first to offer a guiding service in the valley for backcountry skiing. Dick earned his IFMGA guiding designation and has several first ascents around Chamonix and Nepal. Dick was also a president of the American Mountain Guides Association. Next up is Chris Davenport, one of the best big mountain skiers in the world today and probably ever. Chris started winning extreme skiing championships in the 90s and went on to ski all the 14ers in Colorado in 1 year. He's knocked off many first ascents all over the world and is considered one of the most influential people in skiing. And last, certainly but not least, we've got Jordan White. Jordan is one of the most motivated and talented skiers of our current generation. He's the youngest person to ski all the Colorado 14ers. He completed the Big 3 in Alaska in 1 trip and continues to push what's possible around Aspen and anywhere there are mountains. It's also Jordan's birthday today, so happy birthday!
So you guys can just send the tequila shots right up here.
So to get started, I kind of want to, talk to these guys and get their feel for what the backcountry skiing scene was like in and around Aspen when they got started. So Neil, let's start with you. What got you started skiing and exploring around Aspen?
Well, I started skiing and racing. Actually, I've seen a couple of my old coaches here. Pretty cool crowd, by the way. There's so many people here. I look around at the faces that I've toured with or have known about their ascents.
We can't hear very well. Mike is not working.
Give him your.
How about that?
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, I wanted to say that there's so many faces of people that I see here that I've toured with or done stuff with or I've looked up to throughout the years. It's really great. What an amazing crowd just out here. So that's pretty cool. So I grew up ski racing, and here in Aspen, skiing is kind of what you do early on. And my dad was a ski area planner. He designed snowmats. So my first experience in the backcountry, if you will, believe it or not, was like on the Big Burn and Elk Camp and High Alpine pre-lifts. So he took me up as a kid when this is in the late 60s, and we'd go on the snowcat or in ski-doos and whatnot and ski up there, and he'd flag trails and figure out where the lifts were going to go and all that. So that was kind of my early introduction to backcountry skiing. Then with the ski team, we'd always go up on Independence Pass and ski up there in the fall. Before they got all weird about closing the pass, it was sort of, if you could get to the top, that was cool. Going up there in chains and skiing up on Heart Attack Hill and all that. And then, of course, we'd tour around and do other things off of the pass, mostly in the spring, but sometimes early in the fall. Skiing was in the backcountry, alpine boots like that and carrying your skis over your shoulder, or perhaps more touring, where Artie came from. The word touring is really kind of a Nordic term about going out and seeing a bunch of country and just tooling around. And if you got a few turns in, that was great. Now, you know, the backcountry flow is really about going up and slaying powder, but the original tours were just that. They were tours, and my first boots that I used, other than mountaineering boots to get into climbs, and then that was sort of backcountry skiing, but were old Nordic boots. And the first pair of real boots that I actually bought from this guy right here. I don't know if you remember, but I bought a pair of leather Kesley 3-pin boots from you, and they were old when I got them from him. and that was an enabling technology to be able to actually lift your heel up and go places with skins on. The first time I really got after it was maybe, I can't remember if it was 70s, probably 1980. I went up and tried to ski the Landry line on a pair of wood-edged Bona cross-country skis in January. That was pretty cool. We got to the top, but it was like neck-deep sugar snow the last bit, so we left our skis. Thank God. It was probably a good thing that happened. I don't know, what else? Did I address that?
Your information and beta online.
Oh, it's Snapchat and Instagram, Facebook, right? No. So backcountry skiing today, as with many sports, surfing and mountain biking and climbing, who knows what, it's so connected to the internet that a lot of the sort of the risk and some of the trepidation has really been taken out of the whole sport. Not to say that you don't have to make good decisions and all that, but you can pretty much go online now or figure out if a route is in or if somebody's done it, if there might be a boot pack there. And it makes it convenient, but it also makes it a lot easier. So in the olden days, as a lot of these guys know here, Jordan, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But you actually had to go out and like figure it out yourself. So you had to have some local knowledge. You had to sort of be in touch with what the mountain was doing. You couldn't just like zoom in and get all informed all at one time. So to do a very difficult or a semi-risky descent was a much bigger deal then, because you were kind of out on your own there. It's great that you can go and get information. The CAIC and the Avalanche Forecasting Center is fantastic, and it's all good. But a bit of the adventure is perhaps missing unless you go to faraway places and really get after it out there.
Thanks, Neil. Art, you were a pioneer of the telemark age. Can you talk a little bit about how the telemark scene in the late 70s and 80s was opening up some new opportunities in the backcountry?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, in the 70s, there were you had two options. You had a Silveretta binding or a Raymer binding, or you could go super lightweight. And I preferred to cover ground faster, more efficiently. Plus, there were a number of skiers who were taking the lighter gear and doing some interesting things. Ned Gillette was a big influence for me when I was younger, and he had skied around Denali and crossed Ellesmere Island on lightweight Nordic gear. And so we went out and we got the gear and we taught ourselves how to ski, how to telemark. We looked at old photographs. I had a friend who was a four-way skier, jumper and Nordic skier, and he taught me the first telemark turns that I learned. So after a while, we got pretty good, and we went and decided to go do some bigger exploration. So we went up to the St. Elias Range and we skied around Mount Logan in 1978. It was about 125, 130 mile tour up to just under 20,000 feet and skied off the summit on tellies, and which it's really good. Had we known what we were getting into, we would have really never have done it or tried it. But it's really good to be 25 and be completely naive and not have a lot of information. But it was really a different approach then. You had to look, really, you got all your information from someone who'd been there before, from looking at a map was the primary guide, or you did a visual inspection by just going there. So, but it was fun. It was a fun way to explore.
What about some of the early tours you did around the Aspen area?
Well, yeah, it's funny. I would actually skied a bit more in Canada than I did I would go to Canada almost every year and go explore something. But the first tours were things like going up and skiing off of Castle down to the hot springs, spending the night, and then getting our gear together and going over to Crested Butte. So we skied back and forth a number of times. Those were probably some of the early telemark adventures. So,
Dick, starting a guiding service in Aspen was probably a pretty interesting idea at the time. Can you talk to us a little bit about what your motivations were for starting the guide service, and who were your first clients? What were they wanting to ski? What were the objectives of the day? It probably wasn't what it is today with the lift serve backcountry.
Is this working? Well, good question, but I'm not so sure how simple that answer is. I moved here and didn't have any intention of being a guide or any of that. I moved here in '77, and it's sort of like remembering the old one-liner. If you remember the '60s, you weren't there. So I moved here, and I have to say, I came here as a climber. I came in here as an alpinist. My skiing was really more of an approach. I've come a long way, although I wonder about my skills these days. But I ended up buying the guide service from a guy named Cardo, Tom Merrill. People know Cardo. And things just kind of fell into place. But I have to say that at the beginning of this whole thing, there wasn't much guiding going on. It was a one-person operation. Overhead was cheap, and I traveled a lot. So I immediately fell in with good friends like Slowman, and we just started exploring. Backcountry skiing at that time was pretty rudimentary. I do remember my first trip to the Goobin Green, and we used an avalanche cord. Beacons weren't really very popular yet, and things like that were going on. But obviously things developed quite a bit over those years. It's amazing. We've been in business for almost 40 years, and I'm pretty happy about the way things have worked out. So, yeah. Oh, that's a good one. You know, because overhead was so cheap, you know, there wasn't much going on. I mean, I'd get a call from somebody saying, you know, I'd like to go skiing, and I said, well, you know, what do you charge? I go, well, $45, you know, a day. It's like, well, that seems, you know, that's, you know, no way. You know, so, you know, but remember, in those days, you know, it was more touring. It really was touring. It wasn't so much fall-on skiing and ski mountaineering. A lot of hut trips. So the clients were just slightly better or worse than I was, as far as skill goes. The things were just developing. The 70s and 80s were the beginning of all this. And I have to say, this is an amazing turnout. I'm just so thrilled to be in a place like this. Here's to y'all.
Thanks, Dick. Chris, with your background being a racer from the East Coast, you know, how did you end up in Aspen? How did you pick Aspen, and what was it in the backcountry that motivated you to really explore what we have here?
Should we go with that handheld?
Thanks, Chase. Yeah, echo Dick and everybody's sentiments. Thank you guys so much for being here. This is amazing. One of the things that I've found over the years and found very quickly after moving to Aspen is the sense of community in this place. The mountain community, the skiers, is as good as anywhere in the world that I think any of us have been. It's all of you guys, and it just, yeah, it feels awesome to be up here and have you all here. So thank you for the opportunity. Thanks for coming. Yeah, I grew up in New Hampshire. My grandfather built a cabin in 1938 in North Conway, and he started going up to Tuckerman Ravine on Mount Washington to ski. He brought his kids, my dad and siblings, their siblings, up skiing in Tuckerman, and I grew up going up there every year. So that was my introduction to the backcountry. But I also knew that there were bigger mountains out west. So I graduated from high school and moved to Boulder to CU. I was ski racing like Neil. I was skiing on the ski team. Neil also went to CU. And the first week or two, I was also a climber, because in North Conway is one of the meccas of East Coast rock climbing. So the first week or two that I was a freshman at CU, I walked into Neptune Mountaineering, and I bought Lou Dawson's book, his Guide to the Colorado 14ers, Volume 1. And it was my Bible. I still have that tattered, dog-eared copy that's almost, I mean, it's just been gone through so many times, but I went, oh my God, you can ski on the highest peaks of Colorado, and here's all the routes. And that became, as I said, my Bible. And so ski racing sort of dwindled for me because I became attracted to the bigger mountains. But how did I move to Aspen? Of course, it was because of girl. I was living in Nederland, Colorado. It was closer to the skiing, with a gal named Brooke McKenzie, whose father, Doug McKenzie, was the general manager of Snowmass. And so as we were getting ready to graduate, I was like, I don't know, I've applied for jobs coaching ski racing in Jackson Hole and Snowbird and some other places. And she's like, really? You should just call my dad. He runs Snowmass. Okay. So I called up Doug McKenzie, and I drove up and sat down with him, and he's like, offered me a job in the race department in Snowmass, and that's how I ended up here, and very quickly discovered the Snowmass backcountry and side country and the size of the mountains here. And I'd come up during college and ski Castle Peak, but then the first year I moved here, I went up with the late great Corey Bretman and skied the North Face and North Maroon in full alpine gear. Alpine ski was actually my racing skis, my GS skis. Yeah, and once I did that, it was like, you know, yeah, the drug had hit the vein. I was hooked on mountaineering. So that's my story in a nutshell. But I've just, yeah, obviously very quickly fell in love with this place and the lifetime's worth of opportunity that these mountains present. I was out on Highlands Ridge today, looking out at a vista that I've seen, you know, hundreds and hundreds of times, and still just completely, I don't know, drop-jawed at what I saw out there. There's just so much more to do. Maybe Jordan will talk about that in a little bit.
All right, Jordan. Being our current generation of backcountry enthusiast. You know, what's driving the sport around Aspen today? What are the motivations for you guys getting out there and pushing it, and you know, what gets you excited about going to the backcountry in Aspen?
I have to echo it too. Thanks for being here. In all honesty, like, he kind of stole my little segue there, because growing up with my dad, I was just climbing all the 14ers all over the place. And the same book, I have the same one that's, you know, I'm having to like put the pieces back together every time I pull it out. Lou Dawson was kind of like a guy who motivated me to get out to the 14ers. You know, around here, to push the sport, you have to do what these guys like left for you. Is kind of where I've been. No, I'm saying that like I've had to get like annoyingly creative because they've skied all the good lines already. No, I mean, around here it's like it kind of started for me, you know, something clicked for me last winter. It's like I followed, you know, Lou and Dav's footsteps of skiing all the 14ers, and, you know, it was a really fun project. You know, I wanted to stay closer to home, so I started really trying to explore all the new things around Aspen. I've been skiing a lot up Independence Pass, and what I kind of figured out last year is that every time I got to the top of a new summit, I would just look out and realize that, okay, well, tomorrow I want to go ski that peak. And so it wasn't like, I tried to get away from the list thing a little bit and just kind of go with, hey, what looks good, you know? And then I'd go back to the map that night and try to figure out how I get to said peak and that drainage, you know, how many miles of snowmobiling before I start skidding, before I start cramponing up something. And that's been like the last couple of years of it for me, especially since the 14ers have kind of been checked off the list for me. I feel like, you know, there's so much to explore here, and the backcountry is so extensive around here that, I don't know, I don't feel like I have to drive that far to go anywhere.
I'm just going to ask Jordan one question. So maybe you were going to get to this. I don't want to steal your thunder, but what do you got your eye on right now, buddy?
So I know I just said I was kind of done with lists, but I mean, they're just an easy way to kind of like formulate a project for yourself. And so somewhat inspired by Chris and Ted and Christie's project last year of skiing the Centennial 13ers, I tried to come up with something that would kind of work for me a little better, with maybe a little less travel, a little less commitment to windshield time for me. And I'm trying to just ski every peak point over 13,000 feet that's in Pitkin County and the Elks. There's about 88 peaks. I'm almost halfway done. And that doesn't include the 14ers. So that's what I'm working on right now. It's kind of like it came from that thing last year, like, oh, what's that peak? Oh, well, it's another 13er. Oh, what's that peak? Oh, well, it's over 13,000 feet. It seems like a lot of cool peaks around here over 13,000 feet. So yeah, it's kind of what I'm working on at the moment. And then potentially trying to head overseas to ski in Western Mongolia this spring.
That'll be some windshield time.
Hopefully you're not flying the plane. That's great. You know, kind of talking about what these guys were talking about with getting information and beta on where to go and what to do. You know, can you guys talk a little bit about how you assessed avalanche conditions around here? I mean, Colorado's known for having one of the scariest snowpacks in the world. How did you guys deal with that and live to tell the tale that we're telling tonight?
So that's a great question, especially for some of the younger folks back there at the bar who aren't listening at the moment. But it's really easy in a year like this or through social media to kind of think that the Colorado snowpack around here is just all cool and great, good to go all the time, but it's not. And I think that's why Colorado lagged in some of the really big descents that were done across the country, because our intercontinental snowpack here is really quite dangerous. snow's dry, we get long periods of wind and no snow, things dry out, they fast it up, then we get big snow. So you guys know the story there. And we have really steep, big, high altitude terrain. So it's super dangerous. And so when we were young, we were younger, right? We were probably more cautious than my perception of a lot of ski descents are today. And there wasn't a thing like CAIC. You couldn't really find out what was going on the internet. You kind of called around, you went out, you dug some pits, you stomped around, you looked, you watched, and we were very patient with what we did. Not to say that solved all the problems. I've had lots of friends who've gotten caught in avalanches, and there's a whole litany and history of big accidents with serious injuries and fatalities around here. So it's very serious. It's super serious. I can't even remember exactly what your question was, but so the information was there wasn't information. We developed that information on our own. We went out and we looked and we assessed what was going on. And when in doubt, my motto, being young and a bit conservative, was just to be very patient and to wait. Where now, there's a lot of pressure to go sooner and quicker because there's other people out there snagging your lines, and it's very easy to sort of see people ski or see tracks and go, well, it's time to go, when maybe that's not the case. Or the tracks that you see were put in a very particular aspect, very exacting, and for people who don't understand maybe exactly that choice, they'll ski left or right of that a little bit, and the exposure changes, and bad things can happen. So the answer to your question is I guess that we were just very cautious, and we kind of learned along the way. And Dick can probably talk to this as much as anybody with the advent of CAIC and protocols and avalanche training that is taught through different guiding schools and whatnot. And that's really given people a great amount of knowledge, not just confidence about today, but knowledge and being able to assess what's out there themselves, and then choose what they want to do based on their level of risk and what the project is and how they feel about it.
That's great. Dick, do you want to maybe follow up on that and kind of talk about how avalanche courses have kind of shaped the way for more exploration?
Yeah, in the early days, we really just had a very simplistic approach to avalanche danger. We knew that there was this sugar snow near the ground and like how much of it was there, but basically it was, I think I agree with Neil, fairly conservative. We weren't skiing, big lines so much in those days. However, all of a sudden in the late 90s, things started getting organized. The American Institute for Avalanche Research and Education, ARI, started. It was a trickle-down effect, starting with a level 3, because the professionals were really, really in the dark as far as what to do with decision making. So that all started, and the formality really kicked in at that point. And it was an exciting time because we were all just kind of, test pilots in a way. But the formality did come along. I can't remember exactly when the CIC really got organized, but well before the internet and all that, things started to really come together as a formality in avalanche education. And we were at the forefront of that, of course, and now, it's really impressive because the amount of people that are taking courses, I don't know if we've probably had 12 or 13 courses this year already, and they're basically full. It's great. People are taking the courses, and I think considering this group and all, we have a great backcountry community, and considering what we're dealt with for snowpack, it's a pretty impressive safety record, with some exceptions out there. But basically, that's where we've come along.
I'd like to add something that there's a really interesting statistic, and that is the number of fatalities in Colorado has been roughly the same from the 1970s till now, and that says a lot about the sharing of information, the avalanche education, improved equipment, and a much better approach by skiers. When we were skiing in the 70s and 80s, like Neil mentioned, really it was we did a lot of the skiing in the spring, because if there were facets and TG crystals out there, we just kind of didn't go, you know. And then when March would come around, stability would increase in April, and that's kind of when all the skiing got done. But these days, people are out skiing in November, and they're skiing if there's enough snow, they're skiing some pretty impressive lines in December and January. And a lot of it has to do with just the improved system, the greater amount of information, the tremendous amount of sharing of information. Say if our zone is getting active, we know about it within 24 hours, or sometimes within 6 or 7 hours, because of the internet. So, but it has really made things much safer, and we're all glad to see that. So, because in the old days, a lot of times you just like use the crash test dummy approach, and you go like, well, why don't you take? Let me be the first line.
That's good. You go first. I think, Artie, you still use the crash test on the approach. Try not to. I was fortunate that the CIAC was around when I started getting into the backcountry in Colorado, but the internet wasn't. So what I would do, and I had built a network of friends in all these different ski towns, is I would just call people and try to get as much data as possible from people that had been out there. And it might have been CIAC forecasters in Crested Butte or in the San Juans. It might have just been friends who've been backcountry skiing. But the whole idea was to just get the big picture. Like, what's happening in your zone? What are you seeing? What's the snow doing? I can't remember. I don't think CIAC had a forecast online until probably mid-2000s, maybe 04, 05, somewhere in there, and definitely pre-social media. So it was important to just pick up the phone, call the CIAC hotline, listen to their recorded forecast, but also just call people and see what's going on. And now we see that all the time. People sharing stuff on social media, and others, you know, using that information to make decisions. But it doesn't change the fact, going back to the 70s, as Art was saying, that, you know, the more information you have, the better your capability is to make a good decision out there. So, you know, it's all about collecting data, whether it's from friends, whether it's from forecasts, or what you see on the internet. The more info we have, the better. I mean, that's kind of why we're all still sitting here, which is pretty awesome. Congratulations, you guys. That's impressive. Jordan?
When I really started skiing, when I started skiing in the backcountry is when CIAC was kind of getting going on the online version. But when I started climbing in the backcountry, like, my dad and I were climbing 14ers in the winter when I was like 9 years old. So I didn't know what a beacon was when I was 9 years old, and I'm not sure my dad did either. So, you know, this is early 90s, but, you know, I think that the technology that I think this is maybe something I'm going to get grilled on later, but I think the technology that we've got in our hands today is incredible. You know, I kind of started my 14er project around the same time that Chris was doing his year-long project, and I don't know, the Ski the 14ers website was pretty useful for conditions for me. But I think what Art said about how our fatalities have pretty much stayed the same, our avalanche statistics have stayed the same, is like almost a little bit disappointing to me. Like, there's so much more information out there, but I guess at the same time, more people are getting out there too. But
we're probably 100 times the number of skiers now than. I think that the number of skiers skiing is probably 100 times versus the mid-70s. So I would say that the fatality rate has dropped by 90%.
yeah, but I guess my question is, like, how much more? But how big of a percentage of the increase on? How big of a percentage increase is there in information too, though? Like, yes, there's more skiers out there, of course, and of course there's going to be, you know, more accidents per skier. There's going to be more accidents per skier, but I guess my question is, like, you know, is it just that there's more skiers, or is it that there's a number of people that just aren't paying attention to what's, you know, the information available?
I think there are a lot more skiers, and I think people are pushing much riskier lines these days. So I think it's really impressive that that the accident rate is where it's at when I see what you guys are skiing these days.
I guess I'd have to just preface this a little bit with some statistics, which are, the term side country is something that I've never really embraced much, but there's a reality to it. Just lift access, cross the gate, and you're into the backcountry. And statistically, Picken County and Aspen itself is way higher than the national or state based on side country. And in that sense, I guess I differentiate a bit with true backcountry, where you're, got a trailhead or this and that, and we have very few accidents way out there as opposed to side country. And so I think it says something about the mentality of following tracks or easy access. And I think we can all keep that in mind as we look at statistics, because they tell us something.
No, I totally agree with that. I also think the other thing that you get out of being deep in the backcountry is that you're not, the lifts aren't doing the work for you. You're doing all of your observations are coming on the way up. You're getting those whoops on the way up that make you want to go back to the car, or whatever you're, tuck tail. So in the side country, unfortunately, a lot of times you're like, okay, I'm in the middle of this. How do I get out of this? And I think you're right. I also think that, I've always thought that one of the reasons that Picken County consistently ranks as one of the most, prone to avalanche fatalities in the U.S. is that, we do have a pretty, it's really nice that our boundaries are open here. Like there's no restrictions, but at the same time, it kind of allows for decision making to be made by anyone instead of maybe a snow expert every time. You go to some other resorts around the country and the gates are either open or closed. They're not just open all the time.
All right, I've got a kind of a softball question for you, hopefully, and kind of bringing it back to the history. There's obviously a lot of backcountry skiers around Aspen before all of us. If you could name one mentor from Aspen, who would it be, and what did they teach you?
I guess I have two. One who I knew but never skied with, and then one who was one of the first people that I actually went backcountry skiing with. First was Fritz Stomberger. Fritz was a mountaineer and super out there. He tried incredible things. If you know the history of Fritz, I'm sure I see a lot of heads nodding here. I remember, again, going back to my dad, when he was working at Snowmass and surveying trails and stuff, when Fritz skied the north face of North Maroon, it was kind of a pretty late descent, kind of much later than people ski now, so there was less snow up there. But my dad was working up at what is now Elk Camp, and he had his survey transit, and he looked at the tracks that Fritz put in, and he kind of connected the patches of snow, and I'm not even sure it was all continuous, but I remember my dad coming home and telling me about that, and my dad was kind of shaking his head like, that's sort of nutty, and I'm just going, yes, awesome, it was so great, it's really cool. So, and then he did a bunch of other stuff around here that involved skiing and hiking, the top of Aspen Mountain in an hour, the America's Uphill is kind of based on his efforts to train and all that kind of stuff. So this second person who was a real mentor to me, and the first person that I did some real sort of backcountry skiing with, was Chris Landry. And Chris was a different guy. He was super focused and really intense, but he was into doing stuff. And I skied Hayden with him in the 70s, and I had a pair of alpine boots, and it was late in the spring. I didn't have any of this kind of gear, so I actually hiked up there kind of semi-post-holing with my skis on my pack and whatnot, and got up there and skied, and he dug a pit, and I'm looking at this thing and just trying to figure out what the heck he was doing. He was trying to figure out what the heck he was doing. It was really cool, though, to watch the progression and then to see sort of his eye in the way that I would look at climbs and whatnot. Chris was actually a great rock climber as well, but he would look at lines in a way that as skiers, at least around here in the backcountry, we weren't looking at yet. Instead of just looking for open powder slopes and whatnot, he was like picking out like, how do you connect that to that and maybe here, and it was really fascinating and just super mind-opening. And then once that gate is open, then then you go and your own creativity and motivation is what carries you. But that was very important to me.
I have to echo that. Chris Landry was a huge inspiration to see what he was able to get done, because he did it without any avalanche forecasts. When he went and skied the Landry line on Pyramid, he had to do he and Michael Kennedy had to do their homework on the route themselves when they were on there, and they skied it on 85 millimeter width skis. And when Michael and Chris gave me an invite to go skiing with them one day, that was just really an exceptional opportunity when I was younger, in my 20s. We skied Sobras, and it was just wonderful to be able to see how Chris handled himself in the mountains, and so those, I think they both have left a really, and Lou as well. Lou's really laid the groundwork for all of us and done all the hard work and information so that we could get out there. But also, I think there have been some younger mentors. I mean, Chris has been a huge mentor for me, if you can have a mentor that's 18 years younger. He reignited my enthusiasm in backcountry skiing. We had a chance to do a few trips together, and it was amazing. But Chris, I'm kind of interested to know who your mentors are. And you probably have a lot of them, and a lot of them are currently skiers, similar or even younger in age.
I gotta grab it first. Yeah.
You were one of them.
No. But thanks. I have to say, Landry, of course. I did a trip to Alaska with him in '79. We didn't get much done, but I learned a lot just from being around that guy. But the other thing I have to say is, I don't know if many people in this room know Rick Wilder. Yep. Rick's probably not here. But, I met Rick early on, and the first time I met him was going up Hayden way back, and he was with Jim McPhee over here. McPhee had a pair of Solomon 444s on, no heel lift. We did 2 laps from the summit, and I tell you, that was quite a day. But I tell you what, with just off the record, Rick has been doing this kind of thing for a long time. He's the heart and soul of backcountry skiing around here. There's years where Rick would get 40 days a year in before the lifts opened. That's meant a lot to me. So there you go. Between people like Jim and Rick and Slowman and some of the early days, pass it on.
Yeah, that brings back some stories. I remember standing on top of Loge Peak looking up at Maroon Bowl in the 90s and watching a single skier come down the north-facing slopes of Maroon Bowl, and I went, oh my gosh, who would be out there by themselves? And Max Smith from the Highlands Patrol looked at me, he's like, that's Rick Wilder. And it just seemed like other guys, not human. But for me, and I told the story earlier, Lou Dawson was a huge influence on me, because I had the book, I read it, cover to cover, and then I finally moved here and got to meet Lou and just had that 14ers thing stuck in my head from his guidebook, and that obviously became a big part of my life and my career. But I would also say that Dick Jackson in many ways was an influence, because as I moved here as a climber and getting into backcountry skiing, I kind of sought out the guide community, and Dick had Aspen Expeditions, and so I was this young kid showing up in the shop, looking for information and befriending Dick. And Dick took me on my first trip to the Himalaya and my second trip to the Himalaya, and my first 8,000 meter peak Makalu. With the late great Raoul Willie was on our trip, and I looked up to these guys that were the generations before, and so I owe you a debt of gratitude, buddy. Yeah.
A lot of those people I've only read about. On the internet, yes, on the internet. Well, with the exception of Lou Dawson, Lou's been a great mentor for me. Again, we keep talking about that book. Like, that book was like he had little lines drawn in, and it's, there's more to figure out these days than just, a line on a page. But Lou started out really early in my 14er project as kind of a mentor, more via email, and then as I was finishing up the project, it was about the time I moved here, and I went and skied El Diente with Lou, and for a lot of reasons, it's a longer story than it was an interesting day, but it was kind of cool to get to know him and get to know Lou and get to kind of see that quirky side of Lou, and since then, Lou and I have shared a lot of stories, a lot of his old backcountry stories. But in 2010, we did a wild snow Denali trip. I was part of that with Lou, and it was really, really cool to go from, reading this guy's guidebooks, who I didn't know anything about other than he clearly skied mountains, to getting to know the guy and getting to go to the top of North America with him, and watching Lou and his son Louie, who was 19 at the time, summit Denali together. One thing I can really appreciate, and this goes for most everybody here, is hearing Lou talk about his original 14er project, and hearing him talk about, like, Kit Carson, I think, was his nemesis. I don't remember if it was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times he went back to do that thing, simply because he couldn't get dependable forecasting, which, yeah, I've had the advantage over most people for that, for sure. And much less just conditions reports. And thinking about, like, how much smoother things can go now compared to when guys like Lou were trying to finish that project. And the amount of respect gained for all of these guys who have been putting together the history of skiing in Aspen. And I think when I started the 14er project, that was kind of the start of backcountry skiing for me. And fortunately, I had somebody like Chris to follow around on the internet and kind of see what was possible and to keep me motivated. So I think Chris and Lou are both guys I've been looking up to for a while, whether they knew it or not.
By the way, if you want to see what the early internet really looks like, go to skithefourteeners.com. It's still out there.
Really low response. Yeah. I did, actually, when I was looking up the bios. Yeah, that's a good one. All right, one more round with you guys before I open it to some questions from the audience. What was the most afraid you've been on top of a peak or elsewhere in the Elk Mountains, and what is left to do in the Elks, in your opinion?
Most afraid. I don't know about that. I'm always scared. I would say, I don't know if afraid is the right word, but maybe the most anxious, a little different. If I get afraid, if I'm really truly afraid of something, then I quit, because I'm kind of a pansy. I'm out of there. But I've definitely been very anxious about some descents, just because of some of the unknown. Maybe not the danger per se from avalanche conditions, but as an example, the route that I shared with Chris when we did this descent off of Capitol that hadn't been done before. We didn't climb the route. We had a photo of it from before. We skied the east space into the Pierre Lakes Basin. And if you kind of know that area, there's this big cliff band that kind of goes through. It's really big. It's huge. And the snow kind of goes down and the ramps go, and it's I kind of felt like it was skiing off the edge of a basketball. So every turn you went, it just got steeper and steeper as you got closer to the thing that you couldn't go over. But you had to go down enough to get out to this next little place that we had to go. And I just remember going, every turn is just like it's ratchet into like sort of scary zone. But we did it pretty well, and we were willing to stop at any moment, take our skis off, climb back up, and skedaddle if we had to, and we were fortunate to get out. But that was probably the most anxious I've been. It was also one of the most rewarding descents I've done. And you had a second part, which was, there's so much left. There's just tons left. And skiing is such a great sport because depending on the year, the amount of snow you get, the conditions you get, it's very ethereal. It's like surfing, like waves. Roots come, roots go. Perhaps some kid in the future will go up to our route on Capitol and go, poof, you know, this isn't even scary, you know. It's like it's just this giant snow cone all the way. But you can go to other routes that in big years like now could be very, very Spartan or dangerous in the future. So I just think that it's not so much about the line, it's also about the condition and when you ski it. Are you skiing it in the spring in June when it's all just bomber, you know, spring snow, or are you up there in the winter? You know, what's going on? So I think there's just so many ways that you can slice that pie, and I hate to look at it as just individual boxes to check, like, well, I skied that.
I know. I think every time you're on a summit and you're skiing something pretty steep, the first two turns are terrifying. Or they're not. There's a lot of anxiety because you just until you get that comfort of a couple of turns underneath your belt, it's a little tough. But I think so I think almost every descent has a little bit of trepidation for at least a couple of turns, at least the first turn. What is there left? There's a ton of stuff. Every time I go ski touring and ski something, I see 5 or 6 more things to ski, and people haven't really been there, or they've been there very rarely. So there's a lot out there, right? What do you think, Dick?
First off, terrifying. Well, not so much terrifying, but as a mountain guide and ski guide, we're always gone first. And so I agree, those first few turns, kind of feeling things out and like, did I make the right decision? And, so like, it's kind of that feeling. In terms of fear, not so much fear, but anxiety. I remember one time we were doing this ski mountaineering camp at Hayden Peak. By today's standards, the Forest Service would not be happy about what we were doing those days. We did it like 7 years in a row, and like it was, in terms of leave no trace, we were pretty good. But I just remember being on the summit of Hayden one time, and I was skiing on of course, the binding at the time, which I imported, was the Petzl binding, which is over there in the corner, and the heel, the half moon piece that locks your heel down, pulled out of the ski, so it was like, well, okay, every right-hand turn is going to be a telemark type turn, the other one, so I was pretty impressed how I got up the hill. Okay, in terms of what's next, I just did a trip up to Canada, and it just puts things in perspective. There's peaks north of where we were where peaks haven't even been climbed yet. The first ascent of the mountain, let alone skiing or anything. But in terms of what can be done around here, I'm not the one that would really know. But Sean? Yeah, I know you don't want to talk about it, but I think that there's some conversations that could be going on after this this presentation that could reveal a few things. So there you go. I'll buy the first round for you.
Sean didn't even smile. It's not divulging anything. I'll reiterate Neil's story. One of the most intense experiences of my life was standing on top of Capitol with Neil, looking at a first descent. It was April 19th, 2006, and I had skied North Maroon the day before, and Pyramid 2 days prior to that. and I was really tired. And we were standing on the summit after, I think, a 7-hour approach. We started at 1 in the morning, and we summited at 2 in the morning. We started at 3 in the morning. I wanted to sleep in. We started at 3 in the morning from Snowmass Creek and went up there and summited at 9 or something. Anyway, it was a long morning. I was exhausted from the day before, didn't sleep that well, and got to the summit and was like, I remember saying to Neil, man, I don't know if I have this in me to do this first ascent. Like, I'm really tired. And Neil's like, okay, you know, we can ski back down the ridge the way Lou Dawson did and follow his path across the knife edge, and that's an option. We always had that, you know, sort of plan B. But got some food and some water and got my skis on, and pretty quickly, once I had my skis on, I was like, oh, actually, you know, I'm feeling a little better with the skis on my feet, and maybe we can do this. And you know, with that, it was like, all right, we're good to go, and we dropped in on that descent of Capitol, which, to be totally honest, it's now going on 11 years since we did that, and it hasn't been repeated. And I don't know if it's because I think it's a proud line. I don't know if maybe it's just stupid, maybe it's crazy, but I thought for sure somebody would do that. Jordan did another first ascent. Maybe you'll talk about that on Capitol. I quickly want to mention another really intense experience. That one I got to share with somebody, with Neil. But I did a winter descent of Maroon Peak, so not North Maroon, but Maroon Peak proper in February of 2006. And had been in the Aspen backcountry most of January, was really familiar with the snow conditions, and talked a couple partners who were not that savvy, so full halo effect going on, into joining me on Maroon Peak. And we went up to Maroon Lake in the middle of the night and started skiing at 4 in the morning or something like that, or maybe it was 6. I think we waited till it was light. And by Crater Lake, I had lost one partner who was in like Nordic at Dobermans, and his feet were frozen, so he peeled out. And I started climbing the Y Couloir on Maroon Peak with Frank, my other partner, and got maybe 2/3 up the Y Couloir, and Frank was like, "Man, this is way over my head. I'm not comfortable here." And I was like, okay, I mean, I'm not going to force you to keep going, but I mean, I'd love to have your company. And I actually convinced him to come up to the ridge, to the top of the Y Couloir before you turn to the west and kind of go up to the summit ridge. And Frank skied down from there and left me alone to climb in winter to the summit of Maroon Peak, where it was getting late in the day. The days are short. It was the beginning of February. And I stood on the summit of Maroon Peak at about 4 p.m. by myself. The sun was going down, and I think maybe that line that I skied had been skied maybe once before. I heard maybe Joey Giampaolo had skied it, but I wasn't sure. I felt like I was dropping into a first descent, and I was really pretty nervous. And if you saw the gear that I was on, you would have thought I was crazy. Freachy bindings, and but slowly worked my way down that descent and rendezvoused with Frank, who had waited at the bottom for me, and we skied out to the Maroon Lake parking, where our friend Pat had come up on a snowmobile with a case of beer because he was the first one who bailed, and we made our way out of there. And that was one of my few real, solo winter missions. I wouldn't recommend that. It was pretty scary. So to answer your question about being kind of not afraid isn't the word, but yeah, just a little bit. Oof, it's pushing too far. Yeah. All right, Jordan. Oh, what's left? Oh, what's left to do? Sorry, I got so into the storytelling, you guys. That's why we're here. For sure, as everybody up here has said, there is a lot left out there. I was out on this ridge today, as I said earlier, looking out at the Bells and Pyramid, and just to the left of Pyramid, if you can imagine what's over there, and just to the right of North Maroon, if you can imagine what's there. There's some really cool stuff to ski here. Lots of things have been done, but maybe not by you, and you can kind of find your own descent in your heart or in your mind, what you'd like to do. I'm a big fan of waiting till Mother Nature sends you that evite and you get it in your inbox. It's like, conditions are good, let's go, right? So what are you gonna do in April and May when the snowpack settles and we're gonna have a deep snowpack this spring and things are just good to go? What's your tick list? I think we all have one within us. And yeah, I would just throw out a challenge, like, make a list and tick off a few things this spring with all the research and the due diligence and homework that's important, so you know what you're doing, because we want to be safe, but there's lots to do. We're still writing the history of skiing in Aspen. Don't think that this is just like, this is a linear thing. We'll be doing this event 30 years from now, hopefully, and I don't know, maybe our kids will be telling the stories.
So you guys are probably tired of hearing about Capitol already, but it is the scariest one around here for sure. I had a friend, Joe Brandon, who I skied a lot of the 14ers with. In fact, more than almost anybody else. And he wrote about Capitol afterwards. He's like, it's like major surgery. You think about it, you fret about it, you worry about it, and you get there and the needle goes in and it kind of takes care of itself. It's kind of like you get in there and you're in the headspace and you do what you have to do. You climb it, you ski it, you do everything you can to be safe. I've always liked that analogy for Capitol, but I would say that some of the descents that I've spent some time on Capitol, especially over the North Face, are up there for most scared, or I like the word anxious, that I've ever been. And I think a lot of times for us, it's we talk about technology and how all the information's out there. Well, for that, there was some alpine club group that climbed it, I don't know, decades ago, but nobody had ever skied down the North Face, much so, we had no information on rappel anchors. And so both descents off the North Face were kind of like, well, we have two 60-meter ropes. Let's see if this will get us down, and we have a big trad rack. Our packs are pretty heavy that day, just to be kind of like, okay, I've got a bolt kit, I've got a trad rack, what can I get down with this? And the first time, 2 60-meters got us to the snow on rope stretch. Like, I had to hold on to one of them so I could get my ropes back, otherwise it would have just, stretched back up into the way above my head. And on the second one, we wrapped to the end of 60 meters, and I've never seen a better, more convenient bomber crack for 2 cams to leave behind. And those are those anticipating moments. Like, the guy who goes first, I was out there with Coulter Hinchliffe. We always send the little guy first. He's small, light, but he gets down there. He's like, dude, I got a bomber anchor down here, and and you get down there, and sure enough, like all of us are kind of thinking, I'd wrap off a 1 cam here, but let's put 2 in. I'm kidding, but those are those anticipating moments. But I have to say the most scared I've ever been on skis was actually on Hunter during that big 3 in Alaska. The ramen couloir is in the range of 60 degrees. I think I didn't take the time to measure it. That's what Andrew McLean said. But we had to rappel like a section of black ice to the top, and then I remember putting my skis on and realizing that I put my skis on, but I was facing the wrong direction for where I really wanted to go. And I remember it just being like the most terrifying warm-up to a ski day ever. We'd been out, by the time we got back to camp, we spent 40 hours camp to camp to climb a 14er. Definitely my longest day on a 14er. But I just remember like that first jump turn, and I remember being with like Anton Sponar, who, for those of you who know him, he's one of the most badass skiers I've ever skied with, and watching him be scared, and I'm going, okay. It was about halfway through my 14er project where I actually appreciated putting my skis on instead of swapping it for my crampons. I was always happier on the up. But so watching, but that turn, like that first turn there, knowing that we were really close to kind of repeating something that had been done seldomly, but just knowing that if I messed that turn up, that one turn, it was like game over. So that's probably the most scared I've ever been.
Storytelling. I have a 2-minute story. I realized the most fearful I've ever been on skis. 1980, Alaska on Denali. I had leather double boots, trapper in a pair of Silverado bindings on wood Bona edge skis, roped into my partner with a 70-pound pack skiing down. And we were skiing synchronously, and it was all good. And then we started slowly getting out of phase to where I was in front, where I could see him. Instead of mirroring my turns, he started going 180 away from me, until all of a sudden at one turn, when I came around and made my turn, I looked up, he's going exactly the opposite way, and we looked at each other with like an oh no look on our face. And we hit the end of that rope going probably relatively 40 miles an hour together, 20 each direction. And we both went up in the air backwards, head down in the snow, pinned by our packs, with the rope absolutely cable taut between us, ripped apart. And we sat there between laughing and then digging and crying. It probably took us like 30 minutes to get out of there, but for 1 second I was just mortified of what was going to happen.
tough to beat. Thanks, guys. I'd like to open it up to some questions from the audience. If you guys want to maybe yell them out, I'll repeat them on the microphone. Anybody out there? Anybody? Questions? Yeah. Mike.
How about Jordan with mountain rescue? You know, what do you recommend for all the intermediate and or advanced people that are going to go hit some of these peaks based on some of the rescues you've done?
Great question. So the question was, Jordan's on mountain rescue. You know, what are some tips for everybody looking to get out there and you know, push their own limits and learn?
By the way, thanks for all the mountain rescue members who are here. There's a lot of them sitting right there. So, you want to talk about a wealth of knowledge for the history of skiing in Aspen? Like they're there. Talk to them afterwards. No, but as far as you know, the big thing we see is people take their skills straight from the summer 14ers. I feel like, and they're like, well, okay, I know the routes. I can go up there, and I feel like education goes back to what Dick Jackson was talking about, and it's like there's a lot of mistakes I made along the way that I would love to see people not make. You know, my first trip up a 14er, I was on Alpine day wreckers and Alpine boots, and day trekkers. Anyway, so education, and that can be education from a mountaineering course to a avalanche course to I do recommend, the first time I went glacial travel, I did it with a guide. I was like, there's so many things to learn that you can learn from somebody who's better than you and better or more experienced than you at. And I think that's important. I think maybe if I can look back at what I did, don't do it the way I did. Go and, go with people who, not just are more experienced than you, but that have the technical background to learn from. I think I want to stress the avalanche courses. One at a minimum, but two, you start to learn a lot more.
Anybody else?
Aspen Expeditions will be doing a 15% discount on guide coursing. guiding.
As Mark Twain said, experience is the result of, judgment is the result of experience, and experience is a result of bad judgment. So with that said, formal education for sure, but you got to couple that with experience and kind of make that balance work out. Training is one thing, but get out there and get your peer group, do your thing, and find us as guides. We can help out anytime. But anyway, yeah.
Any other questions out there? Yeah.
What advice would you give to a parent who wants to get their child interested in the backcountry?
Great question. What advice for parents looking to get their kids into the backcountry?
Well, real quick, I think what you heard here as a theme is the first place to start. So it's education, right? And there's information on the internet, but I have kids wanting to do and doing the same kinds of things. So I think the most important thing is for them to realize that just having information about what the conditions are isn't enough. That's not adequate. Necessary, but not sufficient. So they need to learn how to use good judgment and assess that information that they get. And it's not good enough that Joe went up and skied X yesterday. That's not good enough. So teach them that they need to be responsible themselves and to be able to process that information. That, to me, is the most important thing. And then there's lots of people who do it. Go find mentors and start easy. And don't worry about, having them or wanting them to huck their meat off the most, biggest, most dangerous thing. Go meadow skipping. Go learn. Go get a sense or a feel for what the snow is telling you and what's it like. See the consequences of avalanches. Go drive up the pass in the spring. Point to avalanches. If there's an accident, make them read the report, understand what's going on, talk to people who have been in avalanches. Right. It sounds kind of preachy, but I think there's a lot of stuff that you can do to get kids to realize that it's not all fun and games. It can be great, but you have to stay within a box that you're comfortable with and your parents are comfortable with.
I would really encourage them to take the level 1 and level 2 Abbey courses, and then go out on Richmond Ridge with maybe one of the local guides, and just start getting accustomed and build a history to our snowpack. Because what I find is most helpful is digging a pit frequently, once every week or every storm cycle, so you can see how it's evolving, so you can get very current information, and it takes a lot of the guesswork out. Sean?
I have a question. How important are first for you? Chris brought that up, and I thought that was a good one. First. How important are first for you, or first period that you first known skis? Like a first descent or something. Like
first descent
for you. How important is that for each skier up here?
I mean, I still have dream about skiing some things in Canada, which have not been skied. But I would say it's less and less important as you get older. And I enjoy powder skiing so much that that's more of an attraction, is to go out with you or out with one of these guys or other friends, and just when the conditions are really high quality, that's as good as a first descent in my book. I don't know, Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, Sean, that's a good question. I personally really enjoy the process that goes into trying to figure out how to ski something, whether it's first or not. But if you're the first person to put tracks down a line, a lot of work has gone into that to make it happen. And when it's all said and done and you're at the bottom, it's an incredibly rewarding, fulfilling experience. So it's something that I kind of keep in the back of my mind. It's not that I spend every day looking for what's the first descent. It's not what motivates me. But when you find a line that speaks to you and draws you in that maybe hasn't been skied before, and it's a rare experience, rare opportunity.
How would you know that, though?
Well, you don't always know that.
So does that change the experience for you, or no? You know what I mean?
If you don't know or not, no, it doesn't change the experience.
That's what
The
my
experience
question
is still that you're out in the mountains and you're skiing something really cool. Now, that's the bottom line. If it's a first, that's kind of just a bonus. That's what I would say. But no, I don't think it would change the fact that you're standing on something really interesting that you're about to ski down. And maybe someone's been there before you, maybe not.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, if I'm up on top of something, it's my first time. As far as I'm concerned, it's the first time. And it's all about who I'm with. Again, this crowd, I can't see everybody here, but that's what it's really all about, who you're with and quality skiing. Back to the educational component real quick. There is a program that we've helped initiate, but it's called Know Before You Go. It was done by the Utah Avalanche Association, and it's being offered to basically middle school kids, and we're hopefully going to be presenting that throughout the valley. So that kind of thing helps set the stage for a very graphic representation of what the backcountry is really all about. And other than that, spring skiing up on the pass for your kids, and hut trips, the kind of thing, play with your beacons, Christmas, find your Christmas present with a beacon, whatever, just get them, just get them used to, a mindset that they're not skiing the front side. And here we are.
Sean, just to answer your question, I think I really like what Dick just said. Yeah, if I'm up there, it's my first time down. That's awesome. But I think around Aspen, it's like it's pretty ballsy to call something a first descent around here. I look out here and I know so many of you guys that have been here longer than I've been alive, and it's just like you guys have been skiing these mountains. Do I believe that first descents are still possible in the Elks? Of course. Do I think they've gotten done in the last 12, 15 years? Of course. I'd be super surprised if somebody else had skied Davin Neal's line before in Capitol. It would be a truly impressive thing if they'd skied on straight skis, that's for sure. But no, I think it really is important. Like, we need to go back to what skiing is. And I mean, we all do this for fun, right? We go skiing because it's fun. We take risks and hope that the reward is bigger than the risk, right? And I think that the first descent game is something that, especially in the last, what year did you say the internet was invented? I think that 67. Okay, well, the modern internet. No, I think that's like really been a thing that's driven way too much stuff with that. I think record keeping is really important. I think it's really in the modern age, like it's nice. It's nice to know who did what. It's nice to be like, hey Chris, you know that line you skied in 2002? You know, I was thinking about doing that again. You know, can you give me some? I think that's really important. But I think the soul of skiing is doing it for what it is, and it's supposed to be fun. And I have to remind myself that way too often.
All right, let's do one more, and then we've got some trivia questions and some give outs too. So, lady in the striped shirt.
Thanks. We've talked about kids, but being among the elderly now, I'm curious specifically where Lou is living, and is he still active? But more generally, how old are the most active guys that you know? I'm just really curious.
Great question. So, question about where's Lou now, and how active are these older guys? So, Lou's actually in Europe right now. We tried to get him on the panel, but he's ski touring in Europe, and still lives in Carbondale. Yeah.
Marble. Actually skied with Lou 3 weeks ago, and he's still, I mean, he is the mayor of Marble up there. He's got his little place, and he and Lisa, his wife is a huge motivation. She loves skiing even maybe more than Lou does at this point in his life, and I think you can stay pretty active for a long time. I'm out there getting a lot of stuff done. So. Klaus is skiing he's in his 90s, but there are a number of, I mean, I think if you get out and keep skiing and don't get hurt, you're going to be skiing a long time.
So one guy I really look up to is actually Anton Sponar's dad, Tony Sponar. I think he retired from Aspen Ski Co teaching when he was 81. He still skis every day that it's sunny out. He and Anton still spend all summer in ARPA, cat skiing, and Tony generally outskis the majority of the guests.
I'm talking about backcountry stuff, not downhill. I mean,
Ski ARPA is like poor man's heli skiing.
Yeah.
Well, I might be one of the older folks here, but I just talked to Joe Brown, Jughead, earlier this evening. And how many times up Taya? Okay, it's not backcountry, but this uphill. What? How many?
We do
This year?
so first. We still
Yeah, we do it
Hey,
all. Okay.
what the heck?
So raise your hand if you're over 65. There you go. I won't go any higher. But we're still out there. We're a little slower. In fact, we're a lot slower.
Thanks, guys. I think we're gonna have one more story with one of these trivia questions. Jordan was nice enough to bring us some stuff from Black Diamond to give away. We've got 2 questions. Chris, I'm gonna let you ask the first one about your North Maroon question.
Okay. There's a lot of knowledge in the room here of skiing history. So there's a famous story of 2 Aspen locals who in, I think it was 1978, thought it would be a good idea to go up and try to ski North Maroon under a full moon. And there may or may not have been some substances involved, but what happened was one of them fell down the face and actually cartwheeled all the way off the huge cliff at the bottom of the face. And that cliff has sort of been named after him. Anybody know who this gentleman is? I think you had your hand up first. Theo Miner. Miner's ski jump. Congratulations. Theo and Dave Nelson were the 2 guys up there, and Dave is still here in the valley and is an awesome local. And Theo sadly lost his life a few years ago up in Alaska, but was an amazing heli ski guide and Jackson Hole guide. So great one. Jordan, get the next one.
What year did Lou Dawson finish skiing the 14ers?
75.
No.
69.
98.
2004.
94.
2.
93.
This year.
91, you just said 91. Yeah, Scott.
I remember when he was doing Jeremy, but I don't remember when it was.
Thanks to our awesome panel, guys. That was